Did you know that Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah won an election while being jailed inside James Fort and became leader of government business back in 1951? The subject of History Time today with me, Kafui Day, will deal with that very landmark 1951 election, very special, not just for Ghana, but for the entire Africa. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so that you are alerted when new content arrives. My guest, as always, for the history is Yao Anochi Frimpong. 1951 election in the Gold Coast. Significant not only for what would become Ghana, but for Africa. Correct?
Yes, please.
Why should we care about this? Apart from the fact that Nkrumah was in prison and he won an election, how significant is this election?
It was very significant because it was the first time on the African continent we had an election based on the universal adult suffrage.
Meaning that everybody who is of age could vote?
Could vote. At that time it was 21 years.
Okay.
So everybody of age could vote. And secondly, before then, you could vote only when you were either a royal, that is, you were a chief with people under you, because that was the essence of the bond of 1844. And later on, the intelligentsia, businessmen and lawyers would come in for them to be regarded. And also, you should be living in the urban area, having registered a property as your own.
So this cut out our brothers and sisters in the rural areas.
And those living in town, if you are living in Accra,
and you didn't have property and you
are
are renting.
Pusher, no, you will not be allowed to go. But the 1951 election will be very significant based on party politics, universal adult suffrage, and it meant everybody in the country having an opportunity to vote. And also, before then, there were no constituencies. Rather, there were chiefdoms. So if you were in the Nzema area called Apollonia, then you voted because you were an Nzema. And the 1951 election, there were clearly cut constituencies. And it became the first of its kind in Africa.
Because at that time, virtually the entire continent was still under colonial rule,
yes,
with the exception of Ethiopia.
Yes.
Yes, and Liberia. So, but let's take it back, because there must have been some calls for self-governance even before 1951.
Yes.
I think off the top of my head, the 1948 Accra riots, that galvanized the people. Just give us a quick summary of exactly what happened in the 48 riots and why there should be a straight line between the 48 riots and the 1951 election.
Okay, I will say that we had the first political party in Ghana in 1947, which was founded by an eminent businessman, Gold Coast timber merchant, called George Alfred Grant, otherwise known as Pa Grant. And we should add that he attended Wesleyan School in Cape Coast, now Infantsipim School. He was from Axim. Now, this man had his able assistant, first deputy chairman, being R.S. Blay from the Nzema area. Then second deputy chairman, Dr. J.B. Dankwa from Akwapim. In fact, the first deputy chairman represented the western province of the Gold Coast, now western and central regions. Then the deputy eastern province, that is Greater Accra and eastern region. So those who make a mistake thinking that J.B. Dankwa was the leader or founder of the UGCC, please change it completely. It's a mistake. Now, with the formation of the UGCC, the whole idea, if we should explore, was that the British had signed the bond of 1844 with the chiefs. So, and then you also know that the implementation of the indirect rule was just a rule of the people through their chiefs. So as the chiefs collected poll tax, lampoll, and implemented ideas disseminated from the Europeans or the British, the local people or the indigenous did not feel it because they felt everything was coming from their own chiefs. That was the indirect rule system. And it saved them a lot of administrative expenses.
Yes.
They paid the chiefs somehow
Yes.
for the middleman role.
Exactly.
So the chiefs, as very soon Guggisberg will put it, were the natural leaders of the people.
Guggisberg was a governor of the Gold Coast back in the 20s.
Yes, he referred to the chiefs as the natural leaders of the people. And indeed so, because when, for example, Azambuja came to Ghana 500-600 years earlier.
Portuguese chap.
Yes, it was the chiefs he met. He met Nana Kwame Nkrumah. And being Nana means he was a chief. He didn't meet scholars here.
No.
And all the fights with the Ashantis. It was fight between the British and the Ashanti chiefs. Ashantis led by their chiefs. It was not Ashanti lawyers or Ashanti graduates or Ashanti doctors, you know. So later on, when through missionary activities, the country began producing scholars, notably the lawyers, who would always represent the chiefs in the courtroom, write their letters for them, were their mouthpiece all the time. And then would emerge, you know, notable people like Grant, who had a lot of money, with even chiefs serving them, you know, would begin to think, why should the chiefs be the agents of colonial administration, when in fact we have the money to make things change or happen.
Funding them.
We create jobs, and the chiefs don't create anything. And then the lawyers will say, even the chiefs are illiterate. We represent them, we write letters for them, we read the letters written by the white man for them to understand.
So was capitalism on the part of the merchants and elitism on the part of the lawyers creeping in?
That was what was happening. So there was a fight, a straight fight between the two for recognition by the colonial master. Until the 1925 Guggisberg Constitution, that gave a little space to the so-called intelligentsia, businessmen and the educated, especially the lawyers. And then they went to Parliament. The colonial parliament was the legislative council. And in those days, it was not on partisan basis, but at least now they had been recognized. Then would come the 1946 Barnes Constitution, which would also give them even an enhanced position. So as we tread on, don't forget, and indeed let us begin to remember that people like Dr. J.B. Dankwa, Nanka Bruce, Awuno Williams, Obechebi Lamte, Pa Grant himself were people who had, at one point in time or the other, served as members of the Legislative Council. So they were always hand in hand with the British until after the Second World War, when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was signed by all the countries who were signatories to the UN Charter, to the effect that no nation on earth should rule or colonize another nation. And immediately, countries such as India, Australia, Canada, and others would begin to have their independence.
Indeed, India had their independence 10 years before Ghana, in 1947.
Yes.
Yes.
So the wind will blow here. And always it will be the intelligentsia who will know this and not the chiefs.
They could read the news.
Very good. So they formed the first political party, United Gold Coast Convention.
UGCC.
Yes.
49.
In 1947.
I beg your pardon. 47.
Yeah, and the aim was that since the UN wanted all countries to be freed, once we are already ruling, administering the country through the Legislative Council and even the chiefs too participating, you know, we have to continue with the British until such time that we have been given full independence. So at that time, the slogan of the intelligentsia was this: men of property and standing. And that was why the famous man, Dr. J.B. Dankwa, was always championing what he termed property owning democracy. Property owning democracy as against democracy based on the natural leaders of the people, the chiefs.
So the property owning democracy we hear now has roots coming from all the way back there.
We are now being championed by the MPP because it was in the MPP
In the
constitution.
manifesto.
Yes, that's it.
So it draws its line from 1940s.
Yes, those who did not understand in the 40s that when you have property, referring to the businessmen and men of standing, those who are well educated,
have your own house.
Have your own house, be well educated, then democracy should center around you as against the illiterate chiefs.
Yeah.
So before the coming in of the man Kwame Nkrumah, you know, politics was a matter between the chiefs on one hand, who were directly recognized and respected by the British because of the bond of 1844. And for that matter, the Sagrenti War, because Ashanti wouldn't have become part of it until the fact that their chiefs were crushed. So always the British focused on the chiefs.
Because the chiefs will also help them to administer the colony.
And easily.
Indirect rule.
Yeah, indirect rule.
Okay.
And then the intelligentsia, who would be described as self-appointed leaders of the people, who push their way in it. And so successfully, they succeeded. Because both the 1925 Constitution and 1946 Bank Constitution gave recognition to them. And based on that, they formed a political party so that eventually they would take over from the British, they being wealthy and they being well educated, so that the chiefs would be sidelined.
So they formed that party on the 4th of August, 1947. And then later on that year, is that
what happened by December that year?
Nkrumah
yes, by
landed.
the end of the year, the leaders of the UGCC felt that they needed one paid staff, and that was a secretary, a general secretary, to be the administrator, who would disseminate the information on the Gold Coast that a party has been formed known as the United Gold Coast Convention. And the aim ultimately is to help us to get independence for the country. So you would realize that with the formation of the party, the leaders did not agitate for constitutional review or amendment to include self-government, because they felt that self-government within the shortest possible time, when that time is due. So that self-government was not made part of the constitution under which they were operating. And that was the Ben's Constitution of 1946. So people should understand that in reality, that is the reason why some political scientists believe that the UGCC was not a political party, but it was an organization just formed by the intelligentsia, to the extent that the immediate aim was not to win power. Because if you read political science, you know, the definition of politics says it is a struggle for the political attainment with a view to winning power so as to rule the country based on the principles that that party has got. In the case of the United Gold Coast Convention, they do not have in mind the immediate struggle for power with a view to winning independence. And that was the reason why, for as long as there was no Convention People's Party in the country, there was no constitutional amendment or constitutional review, such as the Kusi Constitution. Okay. So now...
And so the paid person that they were looking for, they settled on Kwame Nkrumah?
Because he would do all the work.
How did they settle on him? Of all the people that they could get to do this business, why did the lot fall on Kwame Nkrumah, who was by then in the UK?
Yes, Nkrumah had spent most of his life in the US and had arrived in the UK in 1945 with a view to studying law and to complete his PhD, and so that he will return to Ghana with a certain form of profession to be able to feed himself and his family and still continue with his political ideas. By 1947, this man had run completely out of funds, completely.
What was he spending the money on?
Rallies here and there, and meeting with communist leaders. You know, he did propaganda all the time, and would not do any work. But when he was in America,
He was working.
He was working to pay his school fees.
Odd jobs and things.
You're doing odd jobs, selling fish in the supermarket, and becoming anything,
Waiter,
anything,
everything.
yeah, anything his crown could find. But here, he was being invited to talk every now and then, different places, and it is on record that he barely had money even to buy a cup of tea and bread rolls for himself until his friend Akwajay, who had completed his law program and had returned to the Gold Coast, having met the UGCC leaders, suggested to them this young man whom he described as an itinerary student and substantially poor, but highly politically ambitious, to come and take up the job of General Secretary. This man, what do you call a pageant, would readily agree, sent a ticket, being £100 ticket, by ship to come to Ghana through the Takoradi Harbour. And then on the promise that he will be paid £100 every month and he will be given a car. This was a man who was not earning even £1 a month and didn't have a car. Now would have somebody to buy him a ticket to come back to his motherland and pay him £100
And give him a car.
And give him a car.
Only
for him to do what he liked doing.
What a good
The
deal.
same thing he was doing in Britain.
What a good deal.
To talk to people, just talk to people. So Nkrumah grabbed the opportunity and quickly came to this country. He spent just one night in the house of Pa Grant in Takoradi, 2nd D, Puasi Road. And then the following day he came to Salpon, headquarters of the UGCC, and drew up a plan for the organization work he had been asked to do. And he drew out a bigger plan. He wanted, instead of the Gold Coast, along the coast, as we have already stated, Nkrumah wanted Ashanti, Volta, and the North.
The man was putting into action his own ambition.
His own ambition that Ghana was too small for him. And the reason why Ghana would be too small for him was the fact that in the United States of America had about 50 states. And that was where Nkrumah studied. And Ghana is as small as Texas, which was one of the states in the US. You know, and the J.B. Dankwa, Grant, and all others found Ghana as too big for them to manage. And I'm sure you know the reason. Ghana has the same size as the United Kingdom. So they felt the cost was enough for them. Whereas Kwame Nkrumah, as we said, his background was a country that was as big as a continent. So when he came here, he felt that that Gold Coast must not be the colony alone, but Ashanti, Volta, and the North should be brought within. And this brought about disagreement, the first disagreement between them. The underlying disagreement between them was the fact that Nkrumah was the odd one. The moment he appeared on the scene, it turned out that he did not have any classmate here, because all the people he came to find who belonged to the intelligentsia had been trained in the United Kingdom and had the white people as part of their classmates here and there. And some belonged to the Freemasons that originated from the UK. You understand? When Nkrumah came here, among the white people he met, nobody was his mate because he was trained in the US. So from the very word go, they didn't like him. The second problem was the fact that Nkrumah did not believe in capitalism. So it means, in fact, through and through, he hated the colonial system and never ready to work with them. Unlike, as I said, Dankwa and others who had been incorporated into the system as legislators.
Did they not do their due diligence when they were bringing this man down?
That's 100% excellent question, because in all history and political science books, it is said, written, that those who invited Nkrumah, they did not know this man, apart from the fact that they saw his picture bespectacled. So they thought, oh, that bespectacled young man with a broad forehead and they liked him and then brought him because he was charming, and they felt he would be able to do their work for them. And from the very word go, if they had studied him very well, they would have asked him to go back. Yes, do you know why? You see, the moment he appeared on the scene, we are told that they gave him a cap to wear, and he said, no, I never wear a cap in my life. And the spectacles they saw him wearing in the picture, when Nkrumah arrived in Ghana, he never wore the spectacles they knew him for. Then 3, Nkrumah would not tuck in. You understand? He didn't want to be like a gentleman the British would want to see. And then also, all of them spoke English the way the British spoke English. And Nkrumah spoke English in a manner that would offend every listener. The one Mandela copied. Look at the way he spoke. At long last, the Ghana has ended, and Ghana, beloved nation, is free forever. If it was Buzia or Dankwa speaking, I believe to have been very soothing to the ear. At long last, the battle has ended, and Ghana, our beloved nation, is free forever. Nkrumah would put it in a way that would offend the white man. And another one was the way he combed his hair. Nkrumah just combed the hair through, you know, and would not create the line. Yeah, the pattern that we used to call a boy. You know, just to look like the white man's hair. That's the way they educated.
Oh, is that the reason why we used to have the pattern?
Yeah, so that you be like them.
Like a white guy?
Yes, to be like them. So we're just copying them. And also, if you went to school, you always wore suit. And if you did not go to school, the fancy women called you fratamini.
What does that mean?
Oh, Jesus. Fratamini means an illiterate person because you are always wearing cloth. And those days, if you had not been to school, you would not be permitted to wear suit. You were frantuma.
Okay, frantuma.
But the businessmen and the intelligentsia were those who wore suits.
And parted their hair.
Parted their hair.
And spoke sweet English.
Sweet English. Nkrumah would do none of these 3. Would wear batakari or anything.
And not tuck in.
He would not tuck in. If shirt, he would not tuck in. Or he will wear cloth. You know, you invited him somewhere and he also wear cloth. Like the illiterate people and the chiefs who always wore cloth.
Or like Amu, who he must have known.
Certainly.
Yes.
Ephraim Amu.
Yes.
So definitely, that's why they clicked when they met. So you see somebody like Amu who had then not even traveled outside. And I mean Ephraim Amu. You know, would also kick against the white man. That was why he was sacked by the Basel mission. He was a teacher at the training college, you know, and he was sacked. And so people like that, born Pan-Africanists, would behave the way Nkrumah was behaving.
Okay.
And when Nkrumah, after just a short stay on the Gold Coast, discovered that indeed there was no political activity apart from what he was doing, felt then we are not going to win independence the next 20, 30 years. So he had to do something that will give us independence. So starting from where your question was, the 1948 riots, Nkrumah found the ex-servicemen, the youth, farmers.
Those who had fought in the World War II and had been decommissioned.
Had been decommissioned. They were called the ex-servicemen. And they had no job doing. They're unemployed. And then the youth, you know, he felt that these were people, and then the fishermen and farmers,
traders,
market women, very good. These were the people he could organize into a very formidable force, you know, and left out the chiefs and the intelligentsia. And so it worked well for him when these very ex-servicemen decided to go to fight for their gratuity or ex gratia. Right. And we are told that Nkrumah played a leading role in their organization. And it was Kwame Nkrumah's hand that wrote the petition. They didn't have a typewriter to type it. So when the troubles broke out, Nkrumah had already arranged the youth and the unemployed to be able to steal European goods. Yeah.
Because around that time too, there was a boycott of goods.
The boycott had been organized by Kwame Nkrumah, who was Nkrumah's own friend. Okay. So you see that the moment Nkrumah
arrived, the prices were high, and they were protesting against.
Prices, yes. Okay. Nkrumah, the moment he arrived on the coast, you saw that power shifted from the intelligentsia to the ordinary people. And I will say so because long before Kwame Nkrumah, we had the National Congress of British West Africa. And then we are earlier on, 1897, had the Aborigines Right Protection Society. All these organizations. The third one was the UGCC, United Gold Coast Convention, being led by the intelligentsia. But this time, Nkrumah rather made use of ordinary people in the street. And the first one was the boycott of European goods, hiding behind Ni Kwabena Bone. And then the second one was the 1948 riots, hiding behind Sergeant Ajete, Corporal Atipo, and then Obeche Lamte.
Yes.
You understand? These three. And so when riots broke out everywhere in the country, the machinery was set up, the security apparatus began working, and they discovered that even the letter that was retrieved at the Osu Crossroads was written in somebody's hand. And then investigations revealed that it was in the hand of Kwame Nkrumah. So if it was Kwame Nkrumah's hand, and Nkrumah was a mere general secretary of the UGCC, then their leaders had to be arrested. So they rounded up their leaders, and the following morning, one newspaper caption was, "The Big Six arrested."
And the Big Six included?
Nkrumah himself, J.B. Dankwa, Obechebi Lamte, Akwaje, Edward Kufuado, and then the other one, the Gaman.
Not
Obechebi Lamte was there.
Yes.
Gaman, Edward Oforiata.
Akwapeman,
yeah. Yeah.
So
this
was reported in the newspaper as Big Six arrested.
But this man,
the founder of the party himself was not arrested.
He had traveled out of the country.
This is Mr. George Grant.
He had traveled out of the country.
Otherwise, do you think he would have been arrested?
He would have been arrested.
He could have been Big Seven.
Because it could have been 7, and then I would know William, they couldn't get him. He absconded. Nankan Bruce was not got. He absconded. R.S. Blay absconded. So the smart ones who absconded and their leader who had traveled out of the country, they couldn't get them. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been anything called the Big Six.
It could have been Big Ten.
It could have been Big Ten or whatever, if not more. Got plenty leaders, and these were not real leaders. The real leaders were Park Grant, this man, R.S. Blay, and Dr. J.B. Dankwa.
And out of those three, it was only J.B. Dankwa who was included. Who was found.
Yes, and they described him because he was a leader among those who were arrested. They called him the doyen of Gold Coast politics. And Park Grant, because he formed the party, had been given the accolade, the father of Gold Coast politics. People don't really use it, but indeed, when you talk about the father of Gold Coast politics, just as the father of Indian politics, Mahatma Gandhi. In Ghana, it is this man called Park Grant.
So they were arrested?
They were immediately rounded up. And when they were rounded up, including even Akwaje, who had dictated the words for Nkrumah to write, betrayed Kwame Nkrumah. Akwaje was scared, and he said, I
don't know anything about
it. And the other 5 also said, we don't know anything about it.
The riots,
so the one whose handwriting was there, who could not deny Nkrumah, said he knew something about it. He actually asked them to go for their ex gratia, because when he was returning from Britain, he knew that the British soldiers who went to the war front had been paid their ex gratia.
Because of course, Nkrumah was in the UK in 1945.
45 to 47.
This is when the war had ended. And so he could actually see for himself what was happening with decommissioned British soldiers, getting their payments and everything.
And Dankwa and others could not say that they did not know. They all knew, but they didn't have the bravery to say that so put the blame on me. Like we read in Ghana's political history that there was this June 4, before the June 4, there was a
May 15.
May 15.
Uprising.
Yeah, and one man was able to stand up to say that, release everybody and put the blame on me and kill me. And anytime you do that, God bestows the crown upon you. So we are told that in the history of this country, immediately they released all the others.
The 5.
The 5. And Nkrumah was sent to a prison in the north, and he alone stayed there for about 3 months. You understand? And at the time he was there, people in the country who did not know the leaders of the UGCC, because upon the formation of the party, they had done politics as a part-time business. But Nkrumah was the one who had gone everywhere. So people mistakenly thought that the leader of the UGCC was the one who was in prison. So you see how events would turn. So the whole country started agitating for the release of the national leader called Kwame Nkrumah. And another thing Nkrumah did, being faster than the rest, was the fact that when his real name, his full name was Francis Ria Kofi Nkrumah. And if I don't know, the simpler, the better. A name that people would easily be able to associate with you. So he threw away the English name.
Francis went,
became Kwame Nkrumah.
Then Nuatu went.
Yeah, everything went. That difficult in Zima name.
It's hard to pronounce for those who don't know. So he just kept it Kwame
Nkrumah. And then the immediate people following him, Komela Agbeli Bedema, they call him K. Bedema. And then Kojo Botio Krobo, Eduse, the immediate lieutenant. All those who followed him, or most of them, discarded the Christian names given to them at baptism, that they had become born again, true Africans. Now, when a commission was set up,
this is the
Watson
Commission.
Watson Commission
Yeah.
was set up to investigate causes leading to the riots and what could be done. Immediately, the commission recommended that Nkrumah should be released. So he came back from prison. When he came, we know 1949, he founded the Convention People's Party. And here too, he was smarter than the UGCC people. Nkrumah felt that when you use the abbreviation UGCC, our people were substantially illiterate. So the moment you say UGCC, our mothers, our grandmothers and grandfathers will not be able to pronounce it. So Convention People's Party, simply CPP. And everybody could pronounce CPP. So he always made things easier for himself, things that would reach the very bottom of the people without creating any problem. So within a short period of time, the CPP had catapulted itself to the northernmost part of the country, easternmost, westernmost, and southernmost, and everybody could pronounce CPP.
So he was basically putting into practice all the stuff he had learned about political organization, propaganda, all his studies.
Because the moment he established the CPP, for the first time in the history of this country, he was the one who started using slogans, self-government now, work and happiness, we face forward, all those slogans. The second one was the fact that he started using the youth, gave them T-shirts, moving everywhere. And then he started creating some form of spirituality to surround him, that like a myth to surround him, that Kwame Nkrumah is a supernatural man. As you sit here, he can just appear without you knowing he is just even part of you.
Why do you think he created this myth around him?
He wanted to make himself a messiah because he felt that the whole fight for independence was messianic. An Africa moving from one destination to the other, and you needed a political messiah to lead you. And because
like a Moses.
Like a Moses. And Professor Mbiti has stated that the African is incurably religious. So anything you attach to religion, you easily get the African. So that's the myth Nkrumah surrounded himself with. And then, having founded the CPP in 1949, the Watson Commission presented its report, and the report indicated that based on the near ungovernable situation on the Gold Coast, efforts should quickly be made. Constitutional steps should be taken with a view to returning power to the people themselves. And that was what gave birth to the Kwesi Constitutional Committee.
So these riots kind of just led directly to our independence.
Independence, immediately, to our independence. So you see what Nkrumah brought to the scene.
And your argument is that he actually instigated those?
He instigated it. The negative part of it was that he told them that when you get to the Osu Crossroads, the policemen would ask you to give them your petition. They will present it to the governor. Don't agree. When Nkrumah knew that everywhere in the world, an attempt to cross the line and enter the presidential mansion or the seat of government amounted to subversion, you understand, of the highest order, and you will be shot on sight. He knew it, because Nkrumah felt that unless some blood had spilled, the pouring of blood, the shedding of blood, as God did in the case of his son Jesus Christ, this nation would never attain independence. So at the time he was sending them, he knew that by their refusal to hand the petition to Sergeant Imre, they would be killed. But he insisted that you will be doomed if you gave that letter or petition to those at the crossroads. So the moment they got there and they were asked to hand it over,
and they said,
no.
no.
Oh, our master told them we shouldn't hand it over to you. We should enter the presence of the castle and meet the governor. So definitely,
Imre gave the order.
Yeah,
and 3 of them fell.
3 of them fell. And the
Can we conclude that Osagyefo was responsible for the deaths of
their deaths,
these
but
3?
history has attempted to obliterate that. But the truth was that he was responsible, especially the fact that now we know from history that he wrote the letter. 2 eyewitnesses testify that when they got to the beach, Jamestown Beach, one of the ex-servicemen bent, and Akwaje stood there and dictated legal words for Kwame Nkrumah to write. And Nkrumah said to them that if they ask you to hand over the letter to them, refuse and enter the place. All because Nkrumah had placed the youth and unemployed people throughout the country. He used the auspices of the UGCC to organize all this. So the moment the gunshots went and the radio started making announcements as to how these people had been killed, what they didn't know was that they were making announcements for people to destroy everything European, and they were rather fueling Kwame Nkrumah's fire to burn more. So that was what he had just planned it because of his background as a socialist, a communist, who felt that always he had to use the ordinary people to start violence, like the Russian Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, and any socialist revolution in the world. You use the common people and then start some violence and you get power.
So the Accra riots lead to the Watson Commission. Watson Commission concludes that we have to set the country on a path to independence. And so then the Kusi Commission comes up.
The Kusi Commission. When the Kusi Commission started sitting, you know, they had to select people from all over the country to become members. You understand? Because they were building a constitution for the people of Ghana. Ironically, they selected all the leaders of the UGCC to become members of the Kusi Commission to help Mr. Kusi to draw up a constitution for the country, and left out Kwame Nkrumah and leaders of the UGCC, CPP such as Potio, Bedema, and Achikisli Hayford and others. You know, so they were very angry. But Nkrumah never had that spirit of boycotting elections. So he felt that he would contest the election. So as you know from political science, Nkrumah made the famous statement that the constitution was bogus and fraudulent, yet workable. Yet workable. Because he knew that CPP's influence was reverberating everywhere in the country. So he felt he didn't have to
work something.
Until Nkrumah again felt that anything could happen where power would slip to the favorites of the British. That's the UGCC leaders.
The British wanted the UGCC to
UGCC, as you have already stated as a background. So Nkrumah declared positive action throughout the country.
What was that supposed to mean?
It was supposed to mean something like a sit-down strike. Don't go to work. So it will be made up of strikes, boycotts, agitation, and propaganda. To
make the country ungovernable?
Ungovernable. And Nkrumah used his People's Evening newspaper.
Yeah, newspaper.
Yes, in those days, a whole village the CPP people would just send a copy there, and then they will call an educated person in the village to read to the people, and they say, our leader Kwame Nkrumah, because they knew that their leader who was in prison, and that their leader who was to become the first leader, African leader of this country, and it was Nkrumah.
Well, so you were still in prison because of the 48 riots?
No, he spent only 3 months.
Yes.
But he was the leader they knew went to prison.
Okay, all right.
Others who didn't go to prison, they didn't know them. Because this was the leader who had organized the whole country. And you don't forget, the UGCC was organized only in the colony. And let me repeat, the colony referred to Western Province and Eastern Province.
And where Western was currently Western and Central regions, and Eastern will be Greater Accra and Eastern regions.
Yes.
Okay.
And they never went to the interior. And it was Nkrumah who went to the interior. And that was why he met the Asantehene. And Asantehene called him my son. And he called Asantehene my father. And for the first time in the history of the Asante Kingdom, the Asantehene took a title that Mimi Yotumfo Wonso Yabefrau or Sajefo.
So it is the Asantehene who gave
Who conferred that title on Kwame Nkrumah. And now I see people writing falsehood that there was an Ochehene having the title or Sajefo something, and then Nkrumah imprisoned him and took his title. Please, before God and man. Long before that, Osforia II went to prison in the 60s, and Nkrumah was having the name Osajefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, even before independence.
What does Osajefo mean?
The Redeemer, fighter, the one who is a war leader.
And is the Otumfo who gave
it was Otumfo who gave, and he had 2 titles. He took for himself Otumfo, the one with power, with authority. And he said, you will fight for me. You would fight for me. Get independent from, because you are going to drive away the white man who subdued the Ashanti Kingdom. So Nkrumah, you are my fighter, my warrior. And he had the title Osajefo.
And so he went around the country.
And so he went around the country and mobilized. And then I'm telling you that 1950, he declared the positive action. And this time, it wasn't difficult at all to arrest Nkrumah because it was in his own newspaper.
The positive action was illegal?
It was illegal. It was seditious. And he stated in it that until you have decided to sit down without working for the white man, he will forever rule you. But when you sit down and you don't work for him, he will see that you are no more his slave, and then he will go away. Then you will begin to have the economy in your hands. And that was, and then, you will have the political power in your hands. Then the economy will be added.
So seek ye first
the political kingdom, and the rest shall be added
unto you.
That political kingdom, Nkrumah never believed will come from the constitution.
So he remixed the Bible verse.
Because he saw himself as a Messiah. Because he saw himself, you see, to add more to it. Do you realize that Nkrumah married from Egypt?
He did.
Because he felt that all the Messiahs had an encounter with Egypt.
Yeah,
Moses was the Jewish Messiah. He was born in Egypt. And then Jesus Christ, even though he was born in Palestine, the Bible says that God himself said, take the child to Egypt.
Correct.
And then Ishmael, the grandfather of the founder of the Islamic religion, one of Abraham's children, was from Egypt. So Kwame Nkrumah felt that every messianic approach, what he sought and ordained by God, should emanate from Egypt. And so he felt that playing that politics, being Africa's political messiah, he should have that encounter with Egypt. So Nkrumah had always seen himself as a messiah. And don't forget, he had a degree in theology. He wanted to become a Catholic priest. He studied at Emisano. So always he had in him that religious training, but not a training that he would serve anybody, but he felt that God had ordained him as Africa's Messiah.
So it was a calling for him.
For him, it was a calling. And indeed, when you read every book about Nkrumah, he said that when he returned to the Gold Coast, his whole life was dedicated to talking, rallying, addressing people, and never doing any work. Always Nkrumah had met people and was talking to them. So Nkrumah and Welbeck and some of the other leaders of the CPP would be arrested. But he was very crafty. He planned it so well, such that the vice chairman of the CPP, Kwame Nkrumah, K. Bedema, was not part of
the people who were arrested.
No, was not part of the scheme, because when they arrest me, I'll go to prison. But there must be somebody who knew organization just as myself. Don't forget, they were friends at Achimota. They knew each other from infancy. So this man will remain and then organize the party. So he was in prison in Jamestown. And he spent 1 year, 13 months in prison, because he had been given 3 years on different charges, 3 separate charges, each one carrying a sentence of 12 months, each one 12 months. And this man was going to serve all. And then one evening when his friends visited him, Akwaje, Bedema, Potio, they read together the election laws of the country as they existed then. And then they all agreed that, Nkrumah, you qualify to stand. Because Akwaje was a lawyer, and the rest were very well educated. And Nkrumah himself was a philosopher. And after law came out of philosophy. So what is it? So putting their heads together, they discovered that the law stipulated any prisoner serving a term of imprisonment not above 12 months qualifies to contest the election as a parliamentary candidate. And the interpretation of it was that because in law, each charge is separate and distinct from the others, Nkrumah actually was not serving 3 years for one charge, but was serving 1 year
for 3 separate charges.
For 3 separate, so one. So after serving 12 months, then you begin serving another one, and you begin serving another one.
Right.
It's to make people understand it easier. It's like when we conspire to go and kill someone, those of us who took the decision will be charged for conspiracy, and the guys we hire to go and kill, they will be charged for murder. So there can be one person among them who will serve a sentence for conspiracy to murder, and he too will also serve
for murder.
And then another person only for murder, another person only for conspiracy. So in the case of Nkrumah, 3 distinct charges, each one not above a year, 12 months. So immediately they smuggled electoral papers to him in prison. He filled the forms, they took his pictures, and he was qualified. Then this man, Nadine Nylander, Accra, he was going to stand in that constituency, Accra Central, now Ododo, you know, because CPP had failed their candidates everywhere. So he was the one who sacrificed his position
for Kwame Nkrumah.
For Kwame Nkrumah. That's why he didn't contest in his Nzima area, but contested in Accra. And the result was that out of 23,000 votes, Kwame Nkrumah had nearly 21,000. It was just a record yet to be beaten.
But did the British know that he was going to be on the ballot?
They knew, and you see, one good thing with the white people, especially the Westerners, as against Russia. Russia would have said, I bet you are in prison. And I believe in less than 6 months he would have been killed, and everybody knows that. But in the case of the Western people, always their interest is the interpretation of the law.
Yeah.
And so by law...
And be fair.
Yeah, and be fair. So they felt that Nkrumah qualified to stand under the electoral rules of Ghana.
Which is what they set up these rules anyway.
They set up the rules and he found himself in it and he succeeded. Then having won the election, now the governor, Sir Charles Noble Aden-Clark, begins to have the dilemma of whether to release Kwame Nkrumah or not, because he felt that legally, Nkrumah was supposed to serve 3 years imprisonment, legally. But politically, he had been elected to take his seat in the parliament of the day.
20-something thousand votes, that's a crushing majority.
Yes. And so he felt that the law must prevail.
What do you think would have happened, let's speculate now, if the governor had decided to, you know what, forget the results, you are a prisoner, stay inside?
The answer brings to mind something we overlooked, and it's exceptionally important for us as Ghanaians that but for K.A. Gbedema, Kwame Nkrumah wouldn't have been the first prime minister of Ghana. And it would have been very unfair if we had skipped that. What happened was that when Nkrumah was kept in prison, the colonial administration invited the deputy chairman of the UGCC, Komila Agbeli Gbedema.
UGCC or CPP?
Sorry, the CPP, Komila Agbeli Gbedema.
Yeah.
And told him, you know,
your man is inside.
It's inside. They use a term for the communists, the troublemaker, dangerous troublemaker. Yes, he is inside. And now you are a perfect gentleman. You are taking over from him. Look, as he is inside, we know your party is very popular among the people. We'll give you all the provisions, the material you need to organize the election peacefully, the campaign so peacefully. And then when you have won, you become the prime minister. And this man should go and learn sense 3 years in prison. Because we know that if you were like him, you would have been arrested. But you are a very peaceful person. And that's why you didn't involve yourself in what he was all the time doing.
They were trying to split the ranks.
So, according to K.A. Gbedema, in his last interview before he died, in the documentary, they gave him a lot of money and some vans just to be able to campaign and help him to forget Kwame Nkrumah. And he said that when he had that money, the only thing that came to his mind was the fact that, hey, this man is so popular among the people that the white men fear him. And so the best thing to do is to campaign for him so that the whites will be compelled to release him from prison.
That's an honorable man.
I believe there is something I don't think Peter would have done for Jesus Christ.
No,
it's true.
Peter denied the man 3 times.
Yes, he denied him 3 times. He denied him 3 times.
The cock crowed and then he realized that he had made a mistake.
As for Gbedema, he never made a mistake. Just the first time, he grabbed the opportunity. So Gbedema says that he took the money and all the provisions they gave him. And they started erecting big banners of Nkrumah. And this time he had money. He traveled everywhere that, please, rise up against the white man because he has imprisoned your leader everywhere.
He used your money to do the campaign.
To do the campaign that, please, this is your leader in prison. Vote CPP. Kwame Nkrumah CPP, this is your leader in prison. You vote for him, he will come out of prison. You vote for him, he will come out of prison. And Gbedema says that Nkrumah won overwhelmingly. CPP won 34 out of the 38 constituencies then.
Wow.
And UGCC won only 3 and 1 independent. And incidentally, the leader of the CPP, the only leader of the UGCC who contested was Dr. J.B. Dankwa.
What was his results?
He lost. He lost at Achimebuakwa.
His hometown.
His own area, voted CPP. And then Nkrumah came out of, on 12 February 1951, Sir Charles Noble Adenkirk was compelled to invite Kwame Nkrumah from prison to go and then change his clothes quickly and then come to the Osu Castle presence to meet him.
What was the name of the constituency that Kwame Nkrumah won?
Then Accra Central.
Which is now Ododo. That community would have been a predominantly Ga area.
Predominantly Ga.
Is there any record to show that they wholeheartedly supported the removal of that candidate who was there for him to come and for Osajifo to replace?
In the first place, it was a sacrifice Nylander made. So history must not forget this man. Secondly, when Kwame Nkrumah arrived from overseas, he didn't have money, not even 1 CD in his pocket. But it was the market women. And when you talk about market women of substance, it was the Makwala women, led by the then woman called Dede, Auntie Dede Ashekeshan, who had monopoly over the importation of flour. So the woman in Ghanaian language today would have been called a millionaire, who gave Nkrumah a car to move with. You understand? So this was the woman who actually campaigned, rallied Ghana people, and then Akwa J too. And everybody in Accra found Nkrumah as the Messiah. But the whole thing actually surrounded this woman, Dede Ashekishan. And when Nkrumah, in fact, the landmark there for you to see that this was Nkrumah's constituency, you see that most headquarters of state entities are in the Accra Central.
It's true.
Check out Bank of Ghana headquarters, Ghana Commercial Bank, Post Office
GRA.
headquarters. Yeah, a lot of institutions because it was Nkrumah's own constituency. And he felt he had to honor the Ghana people.
So he comes out of prison?
And become prime minister.
Leader of government.
Leader of government, you were the prime minister. And so when he came out of prison, he was the leader of government businesses. The following the following year, his position was elevated to that of prime minister. And then in 1953, Kwame Nkrumah made a statement in Parliament that the Constitution was based on gradual progression of leading the country to a full-fledged independence. But since the election in 1951, the white people had not made any statement to the effect that they were going to return the country to him.
It's like they had strategically forgotten.
Forgotten it, you know. And he also did not like the fact that this was a man who was interested in international politics, but could not play that role because, one, the administration of the police, then defense, so interior, defense, the army, judiciary, finance, and foreign affairs, these five were outside the realm of Nkrumah and had been given to the governor general.
What could he do after he won the 51 elections? What were the powers of the CPP? What could they do really?
The powers, and that was the reason why they released him from prison. Immediately, Aden Clerk also consulted his lawyers and realized that if you fail to bring Nkrumah out of prison, the CPP, which had majority in parliament, will make the country ungovernable.
34 out of 38.
Yes, because, so the legislature will not work because their leader was in prison. And they will still pass an act saying that they should bring their leader. And the governor will say, I will not sign. And it will bring another trouble. So that was what happened. So Nkrumah was ruling the country. After he was able to start the 5-year development plan, and he realized that industrialization of the country would call for the reduction of world market prices of cocoa to be given to the farmers. You have to reduce that and ensure that everything will stay within the government chest for him to develop the country. In fact, hospitals like Kwelebu, which had been built by Guggisberg, had massive expansion because of the health program. Massive. So it was one block which was built by Guggisberg. And Nkrumah came to build almost all the blocks, minus the new one, which was built during Kufuor's time.
With the cardio
center. The rest, Nkrumah did it. Then go to this place, Efiankwanta, a new regional hospital, and then Kumasi, Komfanoche Hospital. You understand? So he started developing that. And then immediately he gave free education to the Northerners. So more or less, the country was enjoying internal freedom, independence. But he felt that it was not everything the British governor would sign for him. So he felt that he needed more powers to be able to control the army, to be able to control the police, to be able to have a control over the judiciary, selection of judges, and then the finance and foreign affairs of the country, because he was against the British. He was a socialist, and he wanted to link more to the Soviet Union, but he didn't have that control. So he made that statement in Parliament in 1953, and that almost coincided with the Ashanti cry for federation, or federalism, better still, federalism, because Ashanti at that time constituted of today's Ahafo, Bono East, and Metropolitan Ashanti, and it was a leading producer region of cocoa. And Ashantis felt that their cocoa money was being used to cater for Northerners' free education and to build hospitals and schools and
Yes, sir.
roads everywhere in the country. So they felt all these things should have gone to the people who produce the cocoa for the government to sell outside. And Nkrumah would not understand. He was also arguing that at that time the Volta River project was there. They were doing it. He said, you are soon going to have electricity in the country. And it's going to come from a place which is not yours. We produce bauxite and then what do you call manganese, not from your area, and gold largely from Takwa, not from your area. And even the cocoa you say is on your land, the labor is northern labor.
And the man who brought the cocoa to the country was from Accra.
Not an Accra man, if he had not brought it in the first place. So this was what was going on, and the Ashantis got angry and left the CPP. I told you that the Ashantis were not members of the United Gold Coast Convention. The United Gold Coast Convention was largely made up of Ga people, Nzema people, Fante people, and largely Achim Ebuakwa people. The Ashantis never knew anything about the UGCC until Kwame Nkrumah went there. And the Asantehene gave the powerful Ashanti Youth Association, led by Ara Ramponsa, Vito Usu Dusei, and Jantua, the two Jantua brothers, F.A. Jantua, and that is Franklin Edubobi Jantua, and Kwame Sanapoku Jantua, to follow Kwame Nkrumah. When Nkrumah had that powerful youth association behind him and had Komila Agbeli Bedema to bring the Ewes with him, you understand, and then Kojo Botio to bring the Fantis and people like Imoru Gala and others to bring the Nordness, and he himself was an Nzema man. Nkrumah was able to galvanize the whole nation onto himself. That was the story. Then came that split from the CPP, being people like Vito Usu, who wanted to contest on CPP ticket, and they had been beaten by others, got angry, and joined the farmers under Bafwa Akoto, the Santehene's own Ochiame, or
father
Lewis.
of the former agric minister
Yes,
that we have now.
that's it. To found the National Liberation Movement. So when this thing occurred, there was so much trouble in the country, and the British replied. In fact, Nkrumah has said in the midst of the trouble, he wanted independence, and that was why he made that famous statement at the National Assembly: "We prefer self-government with danger to servitude and tranquility." And the British said, no, 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 no.
So Ghana's independence could have come at an earlier date.
In 1953, because he said in the midst of the danger, he wanted the white people to leave the country and he would take charge. And they said, no, we cannot leave the country in such a situation. That's not the way we found it. And you too, that's not the way you came to meet it. So there should be an election in 1954 for the Ashantis to test their ground, whether they had support, and then you too, to test whether the people still liked you. Then we'll give you independence.
What was the outcome of that result?
The outcome was that there emerged more other parties. The National Liberation Movement in Ashanti. Then at that time, UGCC had collapsed. So J.B. Dankwa did not play any political role in 1954. In 1954, it was Bafwa Akoto who led them. Then the Northerners, led by S.G. Dombo, and then Alhaji Yakubu Tali and J.Y. Brahma, you understand, came together and felt that because they had not enjoyed education, they didn't have schools there, they had not have education. If they helped the Southerners to get independence, the white man will leave and they will serve the Southerners. So they will prefer either having their own country or the country must not have independence at all. So they founded the Northern People's Party. And then a certain people outside Angola also founded the Trans-Volta Togoland Party, led by S.G. Anto, that they would want to go back to Togo. And with this, and then the Muslims also said Christians did not have much respect for them, so they formed their own party.
Ghana was just splitting up and
fragmenting. And then the
Ghans
also said there are too many immigrants here. Akan people, Northern people, Ewa people, trying to push them into the sea. So they want to form their own party, and if they win, they will chuck everybody out of Accra and became known as Gashifi Mokwe. So apart from the Convention People's Party, every party was sectional. So when they went for the election, they all won bits and pieces from the areas they were coming from. And CPP rather won
the whole country, yeah.
Out of 104, they had 70 plus. And so Nkrumah retained his position as prime minister and then went ahead that they should give him independence. And the white people said that your party in power is the official government or majority party, but there is no minority party in parliament because NLM cannot be a minority party. They represent Ashanti interests. And the party with the second number of seats after the CPP was the NPP. And it represented only the northern people. And then Volta the same, Gashipi Mokwe the same.
And the Muslims too.
Yes, so we want a situation whereby there will be another election and then everybody to come together. And Nkrumah quickly got angry and had a new legislation passed called Anti-Discrimination Act, and where he forced the white man to accept that any party formed on tribal lands should not be allowed to contest the election. Otherwise, there will be no independence. And so
by that, actually, you take out NLM and all those people.
So NLM quickly merged with all the sectional parties, the sectorial parties.
MPP, the Shifu Mokwe,
all of them.
Transvoto Togoland, the Muslim Party.
They came together to form a party called United Party.
UP.
To fight the CPP. So here Ghanaians are learning that the Chimabuakwa people were not part of the UP tradition. So today when somebody tells you that the NPP, New Patriotic Party, is based on the Dankwa Buzia tradition, please, the person is making a mistake. When they came together, the leader was Dombo, SG Dombo,
from the
Simon Diadon Dombo, because he represented the party with the largest number of seats in parliament.
Northern People's Party.
Yes, and the second leader was Bafwa Akoto because NLM also had the second.
The Ashanti Party.
Yeah, so when they came together, they put their heads together. And then SG Anto was also a leading member. When they met, by consensus, they felt that there should be this outsider called Professor Kofi Abrifa Buzia to become the leader. The reason being that this man is a professor, he speaks very good English, and he's the only one who can meet and beat Kwame Nkrumah hands down. But if you put you, SG Dombo, you are not well educated, he was a trained teacher. And then Bafwa Akoto was a 7 leader, as against the Herculean Kwame Nkrumah. So they went and then engaged Buzia, just as many years earlier, Nkrumah too had been brought from outside. So they brought in Buzia to become the leader of the new party called the United Party. And then in the 1956 election, as we all know, Nkrumah won and Buzia became the leader of the opposition. So this time there was nothing that the British could do than to give us our independence, 6 March 1957.
And that shows us, ladies and gentlemen, the trajectory from the 1951 election, but even showing us what happened before that, all the way through to independence on the 6th of March, 1957.
And so that is why Nkrumah should be seen, from the lengthy talk we have made, the two of us have made, as the founder of the nation. We can't have founders of the nation. Look at his singular role organizing the boycott, which was led by Kwame Nkrumah, organizing the 48 riots led by Sergeant Ajete, organizing the positive action that sent him to prison, and then that winning the election in 54 as a national party, 51 earlier as a national party.
In prison? In
prison, Dankwa being sidelined, not part of it. And then the so-called Big Says not being part of the 1954 or 56 elections, because by then their party had frozen up, collapsed completely. So when you talk of Edward Kufuor, who was he after 1951? Obeche Bilamte, who was he after 1951? J.B. Dankwa, who was he after 1951? Pa Grant, who was he after 1951? William Kufuor, William Oforiatta, who was he after 1951? J.B. Dankwa, who was he after 1951? Nanka Bruce, who was he after 1951? Awuno Williams, who was he after 1951? R.S. Blair, who was he after 1951? But from 1951 up to 1957, and even earlier, Kwame Nkrumah had always been and very persistent, who would never turn east or west, but that single-minded focus of leading this country from colonialism to a decolonized status. That was the father of the nation.
Father of the nation, says
and the founder of the nation.
Father and founder, says Mr. Yao Onachi Frimpong. And the 51 election, significant not just for Ghana, but for Africa.
Africa, the first real election in Africa took place here.
What should we learn from this particular election and all the events leading to and after it? What should be the big lessons?
The big lesson is that our elders say Samampani Tuna Bedi, whether in Ewe land, northern land, or southern land, or Ashanti, it is only when you had led a good life that somebody in your family will say, let's name this newborn child after the man. We had one leader called Kwame Nkrumah. You may not like him, as one day an elderly Ghanaian called Mr. C.C. Fiti told me that Nkrumah had all the problems and weaknesses because he was a human being. And he had everything bad and negative because he was a human being. If he had everything perfect, he would be God. But considering the fact that this man loved the country more than anybody he came to meet and was ready to lay down his life just towards the attainment of independence of this country. Because in 1950, when he went to prison, he could have been killed over there. And his intention was that even if he would die for Ghana to be free, he would. And he did it. C.C. Fiti says we should just accord him the honor as the father of the nation, and we would not lose anything.
What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much, Mr. Yao Onachi Frimpong, for this deep dive into the 1951 elections. Very significant and a good conversation to have in this year where not only Ghana goes to the polls, but some 20 African countries go to the polls in 2024. It's significant to throw our minds back to the 1951 election that opened the doors for polls where all adults of the right age would have the right, no matter whether you own property or not, you could go and exercise your franchise to vote to determine who would lead you in your country. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do so right now. Hit the notification bell so that the next time we bring you another informative history video, you will be the first to get the notification. Put your comments down below. Tell me what you liked about this, and let's keep the conversations going. My name is Kafui Day. Thank you for watching. God bless.